Number 1. In the shadowy depths of Ireland's criminal underworld, few figures loom as large or as dangerously unpredictable as Alan Wilson. Known as the Madman, Wilson was deeply involved with the Kinahan cartel. During the infamous Kinahan-Hutch feud, he even threatened to shoot a baby. In another shocking move, Wilson tried to kill his former lawyer, prompting the emergency response unit to hide the lawyer in a safe house. Astonishingly, Wilson even dragged his own mother into his twisted schemes. Now Wilson, who is the nephew of notorious gangster Martin the General Cahill, is scared of his former associates and claims he was never part of the cartel. He says that Daniel Kinahan's gang has put a 100,000 euros bounty on his head due to his failed attempt to kill Hutch associate Gary Hanley. Wilson is currently serving a 10-year sentence for his role in a murder plot that led to the shooting of 3 innocent men outside a pub in Fairview in July 2010. The plot began to unravel in 2019 when Wilson was charged with conspiring to kill Dublin criminal Gary Hanley. Hanley had survived an earlier attempt on his life, but in 2017, the Kinahan cartel planned another hit. However, Wilson's every move was being monitored, and the attack was thwarted. Wilson was caught with a loaded gun, and his associates were jailed too. Wilson was later found guilty of a gun attack at the Players Lounge pub, where he had boasted about his involvement. He confessed to providing the firearms and planning the escape route. He was sentenced to 10 years for conspiracy, although charges of attempted murder were dropped. Wilson had also faced suspicion in other cases, including the fatal shooting of Darren Cogan in June 2011 and the kidnapping and murder of 18-year-old Mariana Rusas in January 2008. Despite being a suspect in these cases, Wilson was acquitted of Rusas's murder in 2014 due to unreliable witness testimony. Wilson's criminal career includes a 2009 attack with a meat cleaver, for which he was initially convicted, but later had his conviction overturned. He was rearrested in 2017 as part of a hit team hired by the Kinahan cartel. In prison, Wilson has faced multiple attacks and was transferred to different facilities. He even sued the prison service for not protecting him from the Kinahan cartel. Number 2. In January 2020, a shocking attack occurred when businessmen Barry Wolverson and Gerald Wildman were ambushed in a yard. Wolverson was left in a coma and died 13 months later. The attackers, Bernard Fogarty and Robert Redmond, were found guilty of orchestrating the shooting and were sentenced to life in prison. They were also found guilty of assaulting Wildman, who survived the attack but remained silent during the investigation. Forensic evidence and CCTV footage proved Redmond was the shooter, sealing the case against them. Investigators uncovered crucial evidence that clearly showed firearm discharge residue on Redmond's hands and clothing, pinpointing him as the actual shooter. CCTV footage was vital in the case, capturing Redmond and his accomplice moving together on the day of the shooting. After examining over 1,700 hours of footage, investigators traced Fogarty's steps, revealing he bought fire logs from a Circle K gas station and a jerry can from his sister's house. These items were used to burn out the Citroen C4 in Greenwood Estate shortly after the shooting. The Citroen was used by the attackers to get in and out of the area, a key detail in the investigation. One of the fire logs was later found in Fogarty's Renault. Fogarty, found with a lighter in his hand just 300 yards from the still-burning Citroen, was arrested shortly after the shooting. Police noticed a strong smell of petrol on him and found he had tried to wash away evidence with shower gel. Despite no firearm or DNA evidence from the crime scene, the pile of circumstantial evidence was enough to convict both men. However, the exact motive for the crime remained unclear. The investigation showed relentless efforts to achieve justice and the dark impact of Fogarty and Redmond's actions. During the run-up to the trial, Fogarty continued his reign of terror, threatening people and attempting to intimidate witnesses. His threats even extended to Wolverson's wife, whom he harassed and vandalized. In early 2023, Bernard Fogarty added another dark chapter to his criminal record by pleading guilty to the attempted murder of Mark Ivers. He was swiftly sentenced to 15 years, adding to his life sentence for the murder of Barry Wolverson. The attack on Ivers in September 2019 was captured on CCTV, showing Fogarty and a female accomplice before their car burst into flames. The investigation revealed intense communication leading up to the attack and how Ivers was lured to the house under false pretenses. Despite the attack, Ivers survived with gunshot wounds. Fogarty's guilty plea resulted in a reduction of 5 years from his sentence. His criminal career, marked by violence and intimidation, left a lasting impact on Dublin's underworld. He had significant influence in Dublin's drug trade, operating on the edges of various criminal organizations. In a grim twist, Bernard Fogarty died in his cell at Port Louis prison, believed to have died of natural causes. His death, while not deemed suspicious, is being investigated by the Garda and Irish Prison Service. Number 3. On January 29, 2003, crime boss Kieran Keane and his nephew Owen Tracy were brutally attacked by a 5-man hit team. Keane was tortured and killed, while Tracy survived with 17 stab wounds. A year later, top gangster David Stanners and 4 members of the McCarthy-Dundon gang were convicted of these crimes. Their sentencing was a significant blow to the criminal gangs in Limerick. David Stanners, known as Frog Eyes, was a feared leader of the McCarthy-Dundon gang from Limerick, hailing from Pineview Gardens. His notoriety as a dangerous individual began in the late 1990s when the McCarthy-Dundon gang became embroiled in a violent feud with the King Kopi gang, resulting in up to 20 deaths. In December 2003, Stanners was convicted and sentenced to life in prison for the brutal murder of a rival gang leader and the attempted murder of his nephew. This attack was a key moment in the Limerick feud. Alongside Stanners, 4 co-defendants, Christopher Smokey Costello, Anthony N.Y. McCarthy, James McCarthy, and Dundon, were also found guilty. They all pleaded not guilty but were ultimately convicted by the Central Criminal Court. The trial heavily relied on the testimony of Owen Tracy, the nephew of the slain gang leader who survived the assault. Tracy endured an intense 8-day cross-examination where he revealed the horrifying details of the attack. He described being attacked by the McCarthy-Dundon gang after being lured to a house under the pretense of meeting Daisy Dundon. Instead, Tracy and his uncle, Kieran Keane, were captured, tortured, and eventually executed. Keane, with his hands bound, was shot in the head, while Tracy endured 17 stab wounds. The testimony detailed how Tracy and Keane were forced into the trunk of a car, driven to a different location, and then transferred to a van driven by David Stanners. The van stopped on a remote road, where Keane was shot and Tracy was viciously stabbed. Despite the severe injuries, Tracy managed to escape and seek help. The attack allowed the McCarthy-Dundon gang to seize control of the Limerick drug trade. After over 2 decades of incarceration, Stanners, now 51, was found dead in his prison cell. His death, initially thought to be from natural causes, led to inquiries by the Irish Prison Service and Garda. Stanners' death marked the end of a notorious criminal career. The funeral for Stanners took place at Corpus Christi Church in Moose, followed by burial at Balcanan Cemetery. Garda maintained a discreet watch over the proceedings to prevent any resurgence of violence. Despite this, videos emerged of Kieran Keane's associates celebrating Stanners' death with champagne and fireworks, marking the occasion as a form of revenge. This celebration occurred amidst increased Garda activity, targeting organized crime in Limerick, reflecting ongoing tensions in the area. That wraps up our look into some of Ireland's most notorious criminal figures and the cases that have shaken the nation. From Alan Wilson's chilling threats and convoluted criminal network to the brutal actions of Bernard Fogarty and Robert Redmond and the violent feud that defined David Stanners' legacy, these cases remind us of the harsh realities of organized crime and shed light on the dark side of organized crime and its devastating effects on lives and communities.